Hey everyone, we're going to be talking about some vocabulary. Specifically, we're going to talk about synonyms and antonyms. Now, a synonym is a word that means the same thing or almost the same thing as another word. And an antonym is a word that means the opposite of another word. And knowing these synonyms and antonyms can help you understand your vocabulary words better. And thinking about how words are the same and different can help you better understand what they mean. So we have some examples over here on the side. Number one, I'd rather be cheerful than gloomy. So here we have cheerful and gloomy. Let's think, are they synonyms? Do they mean the same thing, or are they antonyms, where they're the opposite? Cheerful and gloomy. Cheerful means that you're happy, you're upbeat. Gloomy is you're kind of sad, you're down, you're not having a great day. So these two would be antonyms. Now number two, I'm glad you're happy. We have the words glad and happy. So those would be synonyms. Glad and happy mean pretty much the same thing. Now let's look at number three. Are you sure you are being honest and truthful? So honest and truthful. And here, where it says the word and, that kind of gives me a hint that these words are synonyms, because it would be hard to be both things if they were opposites. So honest and truthful mean you're telling things that are correct. You're being open, telling the facts, telling the truth. Number four, the problem looks complicated, but the solution is simple. So we have the word complicated and simple. So the word complicated means it's difficult, there's lots of pieces to it, and then simple means it's just kind of basic. So those words would not be synonyms. They don't mean the same thing. They would be antonyms. So now we're going to, before we start reading part of our the Galveston Hurricane of 1900 book, we are going to look at point of view. Specifically, point of view in nonfiction. It's a little different in nonfiction. So a first-hand account, that means that the author narrates the text in first-person point of view. When it's first person, the author is using the pronouns I and me. So that means the author experienced the events themselves. The author may include his or her opinion, so it might not just be all facts, it might be some of the things that the author is thinking as well. And the author is the primary source. So some examples of this are narrative nonfiction, which is what our hurricane text is. An autobiography or a diary would all be first-hand accounts. Now, there's also a second-hand account. And in this case, the author narrates the text in third-person point of view. And the author's using pronouns like he, she, and they. The author did not experience these events. And they might include facts and opinions from other sources. They had to get their information somewhere else since they did not experience it. And the author learned or researched information from other sources. So like I said, they had to do some research on that. So before we start looking at this in the text, just to kind of wrap it up and sum it up, when a person is writing about their own experience, it's a first-hand account, and they're telling what they saw, what they heard, felt, smelled, and tasted. But when the author is writing about something that they did not experience firsthand, the second-hand accounts, they will use things like facts and dates, times, places, and other information that can be checked to give a different focus. So we are going to look at the Galveston Hurricane of 1900 text, and we are on page 193. You can either look at this online or you can look at it on page 193 in your My Book. So I'm going to be reading paragraphs 5 and 6 right here, and we're going to think about the point of view of these paragraphs. So paragraph 5. Milton Elford was a young man living in Galveston with his mother, father, and a young nephew, Dwight. Milton was the only member of his family to survive the storm. He described his experience in a letter to his brothers in North Dakota. This portion of his letter begins as the rising water and intensity of the storm persuade the family to leave their home for a sturdier brick house across the street. We left our house about 4 o'clock thinking we would be safer in a larger house, not dreaming that even that house would be washed away. We went across the street to a fine large house built on a brick foundation high off the ground. About 5, it grew worse and began to break up the fence, and the wreckage of other houses was coming against us. So which part of this text is a first-hand account? Was it paragraph 5 or paragraph 6? Paragraph 6 is the first-hand account because the author uses we and us. It's telling about something that person personally experienced. So which part is a second-hand account? Paragraph 5 is a second-hand account because the author uses third-person pronouns such as his, he, and their. So this one's just telling about Milton, and this one is Milton doing the speaking, the one who was there. So what details do you learn in the first-hand account that are not included in that second-hand account? We really learn what it's like personally for the Elford family after they left their house at 4 o'clock, thinking that the larger house would not wash away. So we're kind of getting a more personal point of view. We get what they're thinking, how they're feeling. So now I want us to turn to page 196. This is going to be the last page of this text. And we're going to read paragraph 15 together. The storm passed in the early morning hours of the next day. The residents of Galveston began the task of cleaning up the wreckage and rebuilding the city. These efforts included raising the buildings up to 17 feet by pumping sand beneath the foundations. A sturdy seawall was built along the ocean front. But what was once the busiest seaport in Texas was forever changed. The devastating storm convinced shippers to move north to Houston. It took over a decade for Galveston to fully rebuild and become the thriving city it once was. So now, what is the topic of paragraph 15? What's it telling us about here? It's telling us, and if I look at the heading too, that kind of gives me a hint. It's telling us what happened after the storm, how the city is rebuilding, what they're doing to recover. And so is paragraph 15 a first-hand account or a second-hand account? How can we know that? It's a second-hand account because the author was not present during the rebuilding. The account, it doesn't include first-person words like I, me, my. It's telling about what the city did, but not from the point of view of somebody who was actually there. So think about these things as you're reading these texts and what gives you clues for if it's a first-hand or second-hand account, if it's first person or third person.